Earlier this month, the U.S. Meat Export Federation held their 40th anniversary meeting. The organization was founded in 1976. And joining us now to talk more about the outlook for U.S. beef exports is Phil Seng, President and CEO of USMEF. Phil, thanks so much for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
40 years is a long time. Tell us about some of the key milestones for beef exports in that time.
Well, I think if you look back over the last 40 years, I think the fact that we're approaching $7 billion in exports this next year, I think this is really probably the most encouraging sign because there's been a lot of work done. If you take a look at this, I think one of the signature accomplishments of the beef industry, of course, was the opening of the Japanese market. I would say the opening of the Korean beef market was very important as you look at the growth in the Korean market today. And the NAFTA agreement was a signature agreement that actually propelled us both north and south. So our exports are very strong going to Canada and also to Mexico. So those four markets are really the four locomotives of growth for the beef industry internationally.
You know, we talk a lot about that Asian market, and particularly Japan and Korea, as you mentioned. What's your sense? Are those markets maturing, or is there opportunity for additional growth?
Well, I think the markets are maturing, but actually when you take a look at these markets, because you're a developed market doesn't mean you don't continue developing. And so what we see is dynamic change within these markets. There's new patterns as far as consumption, and we're seeing growth within markets. So as we take a look at these markets, they're developed, but they're still developing, and that's why we still need to be there.
Some exciting news out of China, and obviously it'll take a little while before we begin exporting beef, but tell me what your thoughts are relative to the long-term for demand in China.
Well, I think China is a market of the future. The market actually has been growing quite dramatically. If you look just back in the last decade, it's gone from roughly a $300 million market to a $3 billion market. That's a tenfold increase in less than a decade. So we look at the Chinese market in the future as being a critical market for our growth. There's some good news in the Chinese market with the recent announcement that they want to go forward, but as you know, there's many steps as it relates to BSC and opening up a market. So we see that market maybe opening further next year, but for this year, possibly it's still going to be a closed market for us at this point.
You know, it's fun to talk about that large a market, but there are also other hot spots around the world beyond Asia. What are some of those?
Well, we're starting to see a lot of growth in Central America and South America. We just opened up the market in South Africa this past year, and now South Africa is our second largest beef liver market, which is very important, and just treading Egypt. So as we take a look around the globe, I think we're seeing growth. We expect growth in Europe. We expect growth longer term in Africa. So I think it's very exciting still when we take a look at the international markets for the existing markets, but also for those future markets as well.
And you know, we've had a lot of rhetoric around the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Certainly a lot of us in the livestock industry, including you all, have been strong supporters of TPP. What can TPP mean to the United States beef producers?
Well, Japan is our critical value market, and it's a market that we're now being actually disadvantaged because the Australians have their EPA with Japan that they initialed 3 years ago, and they have over a 10% duty advantage. So with our strong dollar and predictably a stronger dollar into 2017, anything that we can do as far as that duty administration is going to help us to become more of a factor. We've increased our market share in Japan. We're doing very well in Japan. And but you know, the fact that Australia has this duty advantage is that's critical for us.
Well, thank you so much for coming to the show. We really appreciate all you do. And as we build beef supplies, what you and your organization does is even more critical to the beef industry.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You bet.